name is Ellie. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a family social science major, and I love people. I love to love people. I love being around people. I love people.
Awesome. What do you hope to do post-graduation?
Oh, I have no idea.
Totally understandable. That's kind of where we're all at that point. What are some things that you wish people knew about you instead of just being a victim survivor?
I class. Oh God.
It's all right.
It's something that happened to me. It's not something that makes up who I am. And while it did play into a large portion of things that I believe and solidifying a lot of things that I already knew, it was definitely something that marked a big portion of my life. But again, it's not something that identifies who I am. There's a lot more to me. I'm still a person. I'm still a student. I still love to go out and do sports and work and go to class and hang out with my friends and do all of the normal college student things.
Yeah. Could you talk a little bit about the events that led up to your assault? It's okay if you don't feel comfortable, or if you don't want to talk about this, that's okay, and we can move forward.
Can I ask a question about these events leading up to it? Do you want the prior events to it, and then it's a really long story of my experience. So do you want there's events leading up to the assault, but then there's also a bunch of events post assault that played a huge impact. Do you want all of that?
Whatever you want to go into, it's up to you. We don't really care. You can talk about the aftermath, how that assault really affected you and what happened afterwards, or you can even talk about leading up to the events.
Okay. So leading up to the event, it was right before the end of first semester, my freshman year. I was at a different school in northern Minnesota, and I knew I was transferring schools, and we were again reaching the end of the semester, and I was hanging out with all my friends. We were trying to squeeze in some of our last times together, and so we were doing the typical events that you do in a dorm on a Friday night. So we were just hanging out, having a great time. I was running around, meeting a bunch of different people, hanging out with all of my friends. And it was a really good time. It was a great night, and then until it wasn't. After that, it took a long time for me to kind of click what had happened. And my roommate was really, really good at supporting me, and she kind of was like, hey, you might want to go and see somebody just to kind of process what all of your thoughts and feelings and emotions are. And I was really, really upset for a week, but I couldn't figure out why, but I knew that something was wrong. So I went to go and see a mental health professional on campus, and I told her everything that had happened that night, and she said that what had happened, it wasn't real, everything that I had experienced, that's just what college students do. So I took that information and I just left, and then I went to go the next day to see the sexual assault advocates on campus, and she totally falsified everything that the therapist told me, and was no, everything that you're experiencing, it's really real. Everything that you're feeling, that's totally valid and totally understandable, given that you aren't really aware of what had happened to you. So I had a couple of options when I sat down with her, and I could do an anonymous report to the school just to get the perpetrator's name into the system, or I could do a non-anonymous report, and then from there I would have two options of doing a full-on investigation with a third party associated with the school, or I could just leave it and just have my name and his name in the system, or I could do a criminal report and get the police involved. And I knew I didn't want to do an anonymous report, and I knew I didn't want to get the police involved, because it was to me, like, he was still a good person, but did really bad things to me. I don't even know if he was aware of what it did to me and how it made me feel. But I was like, I know he doesn't deserve to go be criminalized. But so I chose to do the non-anonymous report through the school, and then at that point, the end of the semester had happened. I went home and I transferred here, and then I school had started, next semester happened, and I hadn't told anybody except for my best friends what had happened. And they were really supportive throughout that process. School started, so the event happened in early December. School started mid-January, and I sat down with my new roommate and I was like, hey, can I get some help understanding this? And I showed her text messages that we had sent, and she was like, hey, just even reading these, like, this is not okay. Like, the things that he's telling you and asking you to do, and that's not right. And if you want to do a full investigation, like, I totally support that. So I decided I was going to do the full investigation, but there was some miscommunication of an email that didn't get sent on my end to the school, notifying them that I wanted to do the investigation. So for a good month, I was sitting there in the dark. I had no contact with the school, and I just kind of was waiting. I had reached out a couple times. I was like, hey, you guys, like, I want to do this investigation. Can we get going with it? Like, it's time. And finally, I got a hold of them, and they explained to me that they didn't receive the email, and I was like, okay, fine, whatever. Like, let's get going. So we start the investigation, and I went to one in-person interview and explained this whole thing to her, and I had to go into deep detail about everything that had happened, but I wasn't really aware of what had happened. I didn't remember. So that was really hard and really challenging, and also explaining what had happened. When you're doing the reporting process, there's a lot of information that you have to look up on your own and get the support by yourself. So you could have an advisor, somebody who is trained in doing this, somebody who can help coach you through questions and help you really paint the picture. I didn't know that, so I went in there totally blind, and it came back later and bit me in the butt because I'll get there. But then COVID hit, and so I moved back home. I still hadn't told my parents what was going on, but at one point my mom kind of put together pieces and pulled me aside and was like, hey, you keep saying we don't understand why you don't like this school, like, what happened? And I finally told her, and I've never seen my mom look so hurt, knowing, like, what had happened to her daughter. And so I did this investigation process. COVID hit, and I reached out to some of my friends asking if they could be witnesses, which that's not a fun experience to have to tell your friends, like, hey, I'm gonna be trying to tackle this huge problem by myself, and I could really use some support, and anything that you have, like, please tell them. But then COVID hit, and we had to do all of these interviews online, so I would go drive to a parking lot because I didn't want anybody to know I was doing the interviews, and I would sit in this hot car for 2 hours and just, like, pour my heart out over Zoom, and I'd try and use as much hand gestures as I could, like, and nothing, like, it really just did not get accurately portrayed. I don't really remember the interviews. I've kind of blocked that part out of my mind, but throughout this whole interview process, the whole process was supposed to take 3 months, 90 days, and it ended up taking 9 months with no communication really ever about what was going on. There were so many red flags throughout the interview of they allowed new evidence after evidence had been closed. I did so much research and provided so many facts and evidence and pictures, and I had witness statements accounting for me and, like, trying to support me as best as they could. There are still things that, like, on the perpetrator's end that counteract against each other, and they just completely chose to ignore that. And so I remember the day when I got the results back of the investigation so clearly. But throughout the whole process, I had never felt more alone and like isolated. But I got the results back, and they told me that there was not enough evidence, despite everything that I had given them, all of the facts that I had like researched, and I'd cited like good sources, like educational sources, given them relevant information, and nothing came to that. So I did an appeal, and what that is I fought again for everything that they denied, I guess, and they redacted the majority of my arguments. So pretty much all that I had left was my weakest argument, and so they didn't go through with that either. So, yeah, it was literally one of the worst experiences I've ever had in my life. I don't wish it upon anybody. Like, yeah.
So with that, did you do that completely by yourself, or was there even like a lawyer or anyone that could have helped you through this difficult process, because navigating that after what happened?
Yeah, so I reached out to a couple of lawyers, and all of them told me pretty much the same thing, that everything that was going on was legal and that there wasn't anything that they could do to help me. I reached out to my neighbor, who's also a lawyer, and he was like, I'll try my hardest, but it doesn't seem like there's much that we can do. I called multiple firms in Minneapolis. I did reach out to a couple of coworkers of mine, because they were the people that were closest to me. And they helped me as best as they could, but they didn't know what they were doing. I lost my best friend's support throughout the summer, just because of external factors, that they couldn't be there to emotionally support me. I didn't tell my parents again. I didn't really rely on them for support, because that's a really intimate experience, and there's something about, you don't want to tell your parents about your sex life. Like, you shouldn't have to. But yeah, again, that's a really intimate experience, and I wasn't comfortable sharing that with them. So there were people I could have asked for support, but I did to an extent. But for the most part, I was pretty much by myself.
Which you shouldn't be. The school should have provided legal counseling, resources.
Yeah.
And they didn't even do that, and they left you in the dark. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
No,
It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, it was horrible.
As a freshman,
You're
you're completely
baby.
new to the school. You have no idea of how to even proceed with it. Like, it doesn't even matter of what grade you're in, but as a freshman, they didn't even support you or guide you. I am so sorry.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It was horrible. Nobody talks about any of the resources available. They send out one email with like 6 different PDFs that are all like 20 pages long, and you're expected to read through that and be able to memorize every little bit of information in there and realize, oh, I can have an advisor, I can have this and this and this. But I don't know about you guys, but as a student, I already have enough on my plate to not have, like, to go back and read all of these PDFs. I can't process and make notes of all of that. How am I supposed to be able to remember that information? Yeah, I did end up coming here to the Aurora Center in mid-March, right before COVID, and I went to group therapy for a while, and that was really helpful, knowing that there were other people who had experienced similar things. But as far as I know, nobody had gone through the reporting process, so it was nice to be able to have support as far as we all had an experience happen to us, but I didn't feel still like I didn't really share that I was doing this reporting process.
I'm sorry. It's just, I'm so angry that this happened to you and that you didn't get the support and that you were, because you went through all of this by yourself. You're a student, you have something traumatic happen to you, and then you're expected to do this, and then for them to pretty much throw the case out because there isn't evidence, even though there was evidence.
Yeah, I wish, one of the things, like, I wish that I could show people is, like, the amount of time and effort and work that I put in to trying to fight for myself. I have never fought so hard in my life, but at the same time, I think I removed myself from the situation and just was like, I'm just gonna have to do what I have to do, and I'm not gonna think about it, I'm just gonna have to do it.
So talking about the support system that you had, did you feel that you were able to really lean on people? Because I know, like, having friends, like, it feels like you're burdening them with that information and then having to rely on them. Do you think that, were you able to receive that help? Even if it wasn't even through friends, were you able to find, like, through therapy? Because you mentioned group therapy. Has that helped? Or, like, what are other facets that have really been, like, helping you heal from this? Not that you will ever heal from this, and I want to be very clear with that. It's just kind of like, how do I get to, like, the next day?
Honestly, I didn't feel like I could rely much on my support system. I mean, when I did need it, I would ask for, like, hey, I could really, like, I could use a hug right now.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right, I felt like I was burdening them with this because this is a huge, huge thing that happened. So I remember there was one day in July, it was mid-investigation, and I came into the house to my dad, and I had scratched the car. My dad's this huge car guy, so I was panicking. And I remember I was crying about the car, but then I just could not collect myself, and I was like, Dad, I really need help. Like, I was like, I need to go to therapy. I'm not doing okay. So therapy and, like, going to get professional help really helped. I found somebody who specializes in trauma and specifically sexual assault trauma, and that was really helpful. But otherwise, for supporting myself, I would go and get a cup of coffee and just try and enjoy being in the moment and not think about all of the things that were going on, but just trying to take note of this cup of coffee that I had in front of me and the flavors in it and the feeling of the warmth on my hand. Take note of the people around me and just notice what they're doing and, like, try and come up with fun stories about what they're doing with their day. But then, yeah, once you leave the shop, it was really hard. It was really challenging. I would go home and my parents had this look of just, like, sympathy. And as nice as and kind as that was, that's not what I was looking for. I didn't want to be looked at as lesser or, like, somebody that you needed to be sad for, because I was already sad enough by myself. I really just needed to be uplifted, and that was really, really hard to get, if I'm being totally transparent.
Yeah.
I had friends who they did their best, they really did, and I appreciate everything that they did for me. But also, they're not trained in how to handle anything like this, so they're doing the best that they can while I'm doing the best that I can. I don't even know what I need. All I know is, like, I'm really, really sad and I'm really struggling right now.
What has helped? What are things that you wish people have done differently? Especially because you mentioned that people look at you differently, especially after telling them that they pretty much think that you are broken or fragile and that you're not the same, which, I mean, something as traumatic as that, like, you're not going to be the same person as you are. But what are things that you really wish people knew of, like, I wish you didn't say this. I wish that I shouldn't be the one asking you to support me, or I shouldn't be asking for you to give me a hug, you know?
Right. I would say I appreciate so much when people say, I'm so sorry for what happened to you and I'm here to support you. That's a great, great start. Don't stop doing that, but at the same time, also recognize that when you apologize, you're not the one that I need an apology from.
Yeah.
I appreciate the apology, And I understand where it's coming from, and I'll be honest, I say the same thing because it hurts watching somebody else go through that. But when saying that you're here for support, I wish that more people followed through on support and giving continual support, but B, also instead of just offering support, asking, what can I do to support you now, in this moment, in the future. But again, following through on that, because it's so hard to ask for help and things that you might not even recognize that you need. I don't want to have to ask for a hug, and some people are really good about giving it, but I also hate hugs. I don't like being touched.
Yeah, understandable.
Right?
Yeah.
But yeah, if you're gonna, I'd say if you're gonna offer your support, follow through with it all the way to the end. Check in, even if you feel like you're being annoying. That might be exactly what that person needs, is to hear that they have somebody who's checking in and asking that they're okay and, hey, do you need anything?
Do you have that currently?
I don't have people checking in on me like that, but I know that I have surrounded myself with people who have been like, nope, I'm here for you, whatever you need, let me know. And it's great because there's a whole circle of people now versus just me by myself.
I'm so happy to hear that you're not alone, that you have that people that you can rely on, people who you can support you in that, because that's really hard to find by, like, regardless if you've suffered from sexual assault or anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really happy to hear that you do have that and you have people that you can count on. How do I phrase this? With trigger warning, like triggers, have people been more mindful of like how to really support you when, or are aware of what triggers you in certain like environments and stuff?
So on whenever like sexual assault gets brought up, we usually throw like, hey, trigger warning in front of that. But if I'm being totally transparent, I don't have many triggers. I know of one song specifically that will get me, but nobody else knows what that song is. So if it gets played, I kind of know, like, okay, just take a deep breath. Nobody else knows. Like, you've got this. And if I need to, I'll remove myself from the space so that I can at least take a deep breath and kind of ground myself. But I don't really have many triggers, to be totally honest.
With going, because you said this happened, like, right before winter break. So how did that, going back to school, how were, like, faculty members and like teachers and professors like really like, did you have to really like tell them everything, or did you kind of just be like, I just need to get my DRC like accommodations, this and this, just because school's hard.
Yeah.
And then have this to happen and then being expected to do all these things. What are things that I really cannot talk today.
I get what you're saying.
But, did you feel like that you could really get that support from, like, your staff or, like, your school members? Oh, my gosh, I cannot talk. But, yes.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
I actually didn't tell any of my professors what was going on.
Yeah.
I just kind of was like, nope, I can put this all on my plate and it'll be just fine. The only thing that I really did for myself was go to the Aurora Center, because at some point I was feeling so overwhelmed and it was so thought-consuming that I was like, okay, this is not going to get better unless if I go talk to somebody who can help me move forward, because, again, I didn't want to tell my professors because I didn't want them to look at me differently. Yeah. So I tried my hardest in school and I tried my hardest outside of school to balance it all. I was exhausted. I was really exhausted, and then when COVID hit, my grades started slipping, but I did my best still. I passed all my classes, but I recognize that it wouldn't have been beneficial to talk to somebody to get those accommodations, to get a little bit of leeway so that I could process what was going on in school and out of school.
That was a lot. what are some things that you wish that people understood differently about this whole process? Because, as you mentioned, the reporting process, lengthy, and it's not a guarantee that you'll get the conviction that you are hoping to get.
There's so many different directions that you could go with this.
Yeah.
And the experience in and of itself, in the moment, it's really, really scary, and you might not be processing what's going on. Because, like in my case, I was really inebriated, and I didn't recognize what was happening, so I was like, whatever, like, I'm out of it.
Yeah.
And that's one of the most common scenes for sexual assault is in the college dorm room, with alcohol or other forms of drugs involved. Like, that is the most common. So in that situation, how can you expect, if you're going to go through with the report, for somebody who is barely processing the events to remember and recall perfectly what happened and to get all of those events vocalized and paint the picture? But then that's just in the experience. If you're going to do the reporting process, I understand why so many girls stay silent. After that, it was one of the most lonely and isolating experiences and the most depressed I have ever been in my entire life for months. It was so hard. And it's not fun to tell people, but I told people so that they had a better understanding of what I was going through. But even again, when I told people, it was a lot of sympathy. Sympathy is great, but we also need somebody by our side. If making an assumption that we have somebody, that's not the best case. Don't make the assumption that we have it under control, because we don't. At least I didn't. I didn't have it under control. I didn't know what I needed. The reporting process, it's so hard. They don't tell you anything. There's such minimal support that they can provide and offer, and the options that you have for reporting are so extreme, and there's no middle ground, especially with these new Title IX rules. If it doesn't happen on school property, you're screwed, and I'm so sorry. That's not how it should be. If something were to happen outside of the U campus, you have nothing except for nothing or the police. There is no middle ground, and that's so unfortunate, because you just need some help, but you don't want to, and you want to come forward, you want to do something, you want to take action, but you don't want to get criminalized, you don't want to go through this experience with the cops. That's so intimidating. So I guess one thing that I wish that people understood with that is that the support for survivors is so minimal, and if you want support, you have to find it yourself, and that's not okay. You should not have to be figuring out what you need in addition to processing everything that's happening, and if you're reporting it, going through all of these re-traumatizing events over and over and over again. That's not fair. That's not fair to the survivors. Nobody deserves to go through that kind of pain by themselves. Even if you have somebody with you, they don't deserve to go through that either and watch you struggle with all of this on your shoulders. That's not fair. And then afterwards, too, understanding that this is a journey. I'm never going to be able to fully recover from this. Anytime that I think about it or I hear that song, I'm immediately brought back to that night. That moment I remember that so clearly, of the way that I felt in that moment was just so small. That's not fair either.
No. And the fact you shouldn't have to be reliant on asking people to support you. They should be reaching out to you or even checking up on you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It should not be one-sided. It should not be all this responsibility on me. Something terrible happened on me.
Mm-hmm.
You guys should be supporting me. I should be getting the resources and the help to handle this. And I'm so sorry that you did not receive that. And unfortunately, this isn't something new. This is something that's happened to so many people.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that you were willing to even reporting is huge.
Oh my God, yeah.
It's huge. I don't think people understand that, of going through that is It's so much.
It is.
And it's just re-traumatizing, and it's not a guarantee. And the fact that you took the time on top of, like, school, work, extracurriculars, like, whatever, to do that is
It's crazy. Yeah.
And I'm sorry that you didn't get the conviction. I'm sorry that they didn't acknowledge the work that you did by yourself, and also just hear your case and believe you.
Yeah, that was the hardest thing, is understanding that, like, and hearing the words, like, I lost my case. And having to, like, acknowledge that was one of the hardest things throughout the whole process, was, like, acknowledging that I felt like I lost.
You didn't get justice.
Not even close.
Not even. Nothing probably happened.
Nope. Nothing.
And then for you to reappeal.
And have all of that information redacted too. They don't tell you what you can and can't put in there. That would have been nice information to know, that, like, hey, the majority of what you're about to say, actually nobody's gonna know.
I'm so mad. I'm so upset because no one deserves to go through that.
No. I don't wish anything that I went through upon anybody else. Even, like, my worst enemy. I told my friends, I broke my hip, like, in 6th grade, and I had a horrible experience with that. I had surgery on that multiple times. I would rather re-break my hip and go through those surgeries again than ever go through this again.
Which is saying a lot.
Yeah. Like, I would rather go through the physical pain of breaking a bone than the emotional trauma that I will now carry for the rest of my life.
Is there anything else that you'd like to share with us or want us to know?
I don't think well, I guess for other people struggling with it, like, even though it feels like they're alone and, like, there's nobody to rely on, there are people just like you, going through the same thing and trying to process these events. And I know that the title of this video is You Are Not Alone, and very truly, like, you are not alone. But it's okay. Everything that you're feeling is totally valid, and everything that you will continue to feel is totally legit, because it's really, really hard. And I know that there are resources available with the Aurora Center. That's a great place to start. But also, if you don't want to get help, that's okay too. I think that's all I've got.
And then finally, we wanted to end it off by, like, we want to make it clear that you're much more than just a victim survivor. As you said, you're human. You've accomplished so much, and you're doing great things. So I think if you had to finish the sentence, I am a survivor, and what would your next word be?
I think I'd probably say I'm a survivor and oh, good God. Sorry, I actually have to think about this.
Yeah.
My initial answer was going to be student, but I feel like there's so much more to people than that. Like, I'd say, it sounds cheesy, but I'm a survivor and a woman.
Yeah.
Like, let's put some respect on women for that one, because even though it happens to men too, the majority is a woman, and my God, you are bound to do destined things.
That is great. I think that's it. Thank you for being vulnerable with us. I know that's not easy to tell, like, complete strangers your story, but we appreciate you doing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like,
you have such, like, a beautiful soul and are so strong. I'm really honored to, like, get to be here listening to you today, and I think it's gonna make, like, our video so cool. I mean, not, like, cool, but you know what I mean? Like, I just think that, like, your experience is really powerful, and I think it'll help a lot of people.
I appreciate that. Thank you. That's part of why I was here, is, like, yeah, it sucks, but I'd rather speak out and help as many people as I can through the process. Like, again, they don't deserve to go through this. It sucks, dude.
Yeah.
Well, it sucks because you don't really have anyone else to rely on who gets it.
Yeah, nobody gets it.
Nobody gets it.
Nobody gets it. Why should they? They should not have to get this.
Yeah. Yep, it should not be normalized the way that some people, it's college.
Yeah.
Like, no, you should not. Assaulting someone, that is no.
No. And even if,
like
what?
That's the most disturbing thing I've ever heard. That's the first opinion you heard as well.
Yeah.
From, like, a professional.
Yeah, I was like, oh, okay, so I guess I'm never going to speak a word to you again.
They need to be fired.
I am actually in contact with the school trying to get them fired.
As you should.
2 years later.
You're a fighter.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm pissed about this.
Yeah.
That was a traumatizing, phrase of, that's not real. That's not cool, dude.
No. And it was a guy?
Woman.
A woman.
That being said, let me give you some context. This is, a 50-year-old woman in northern rural Minnesota, so, I was like, babe, no. Let me tell you what's the real world.
God, that makes it even worse.
Right?
Yep.
Also, recognizing the backgrounds that people have, too. Some people just aren't educated, but it's how are you not educated on this?
Then they shouldn't be in a position to, give you advice, then.
They should not be a therapist.
No. Okay, I guess so. How did you think that sentence was going to help me? Oh, yeah, you're right. You're so right. That was not real.
You are so right, yeah.
Oh my god. Speak your truth, woman. Let me hear it.
So it makes you feel like you're crazy. That you,
I was freaking delusional. I was everything that I just said and all of these concerns. Oh, okay. Maybe I'm overanalyzing and should not actually be thinking about this as hard as I am.
And this isn't
And you're so young. You're 18.
I wasn't even 18 yet.
You weren't even 18 yet.
I wasn't even 18 yet.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. So just this little itty bitty, fresh, just about to enter on this new journey.
Yeah.
And they're let me just tear you down right away. What a great way to uplift your students and make them feel supported and empowered.
I'm kidding.
They need to let her go. There needs to... If you need help with that, I'm more than willing to help with that because, it infuriates me right now, even hearing that.
Yeah, that was a tough one to hear. But then also when I tell people too, I'm glad that this is the kind of response that I get because it's no, this is infuriating. This should not be happening. This is not normal. Why are we normalizing it?
Yeah.
Consent. That's all I gotta say. Learn what consent is.
It's not hard.
No.
It's a yes or a no.
You ask a quick question, I can start asking questions right now. We could shoot some shit right here and
Yeah.
and that's all it is. Make it fun and enjoyable.
Yeah.
It's infuriating because it's just also maddening because so many people the training people do with consent. I know the River Center does a bunch on that, and I'm just the fact that we have to train people how to verbally ask for consent is just showing how little we've come. So little with sexual violence, and it's just we're in the 21st century and we're still
having to explain how to ask a question.
Yeah.
Okay, is there anything else that you'd like to share with us and want us to know?
Okay, yes. So throughout the whole process, I know I talked about how I was feeling depressed and pretty lonely and isolated. Part of that I did do to myself in a way, not intentionally, but I am somebody who likes to stay pretty closed off with my emotions. So I would push a lot of the support from people that were trying to help me. I was pushing a lot of them away and keeping them pretty much at arm's distance. And that was really, really hard on my mental health, and I think for good reason because I isolated myself. But there's this feeling of burdening these people with such a taboo topic, and nobody likes to talk about what happened. It's not a fun subject to bring up, but sometimes you really do need somebody to talk about that with. But if they don't invite that space of like, hey, let's sit down and talk about this, or like, let me take you to a coffee shop and just give you a break from everything that's going on. That's, I think, super important, is take the person like individually and like really sit down and tell them that you're there to support them. Because otherwise, like, I don't just want to bring it up in the car. That's not it. There's a destination, there's an end point to that car ride, versus if you set time aside to actually talk to them and get to know what's going on, it can be so relieving. But again, I was talking about feeling depressed, and part of what that looked like for me was I would go days without eating. I was crying myself to sleep all the time. And I just felt like I was so worthless, because these people that I was trying to tell my story about what had happened and trying to get them to believe me and really, really fight tooth and nail for everything that I had going on, I felt like I wasn't getting my message across at all. And so I just felt so worthless in myself and so disappointed all the time. And that's why I wasn't eating. I was like, I really don't deserve this. Like, I can't even get this story across. I can't even make my point that like, why am I still fighting for this? And that was really also really, really hard to hear from myself to myself. And as hard as it is to hear too, I mean, let's not deny that, like, those are real things that people feel. Like, come on, it's so sad and it's so hard and it's so lonely, and you get into this shell, especially if you've isolated yourself, where you hear all of these thoughts in your head and you get all of these images from social media, but at the same time, like, you're just telling yourself these thoughts and they just continue to grow and grow and grow because you don't have that support from the world around you. And even if you do, if you're like me and you're pushing them away, and it gets really, really hard. And I don't know what to say of like how to combat that, but I don't know how I got myself out of it, but it took at least a year, if not more. And it's still something that I'm working with. Like, after I got the decision from the case and they told me that they didn't have enough evidence for me, I moved out of my parents' house and I just started drinking all the time too, which is another real thing. I mean, I was looking for something, like anything to relieve all of the pain that I had going on in my head, around me. School was starting again, and I was like, I just can't even focus on school right now, trying to process this whole 9 months that I just went through, and then some. So, yeah.
Do you feel that, like, would you say that if someone is pushing someone away, that's the moment where you need to be there the most?
Yeah, absolutely. The times that I was pushing people away were the times that I was at my lowest. And part of why I was pushing people away is I didn't want people to see me like that. I didn't want my close friends and family to know how much pain and suffering I was going through internally. That's not fun for them to watch, but at the same time, that's something that everybody needs to see. Not everybody needs to see, but know that that's a really real thing that people are going through.
Were you more so worried of, like, we talked earlier about how people treated you differently, especially after finding out what had happened?
Mm-hmm. Was
that one of the biggest reasons why you're like, I don't want you to see me like this?
Yeah, part of it was like, I didn't want people to see me like that. Part of it was, again, it's just so hard to talk about, and I didn't want to feel like I was burdening anybody. But yeah, I didn't want people to look at me with this pain and sympathy and sadness for me. Like, I'm already sad, and I know I'm in pain, and I'm glad that you're feeling empathetic towards me. But at the same time, that's the look of just like, you're so sad for me, you feel bad for me. That's not what I want. What I was hoping to get, at least from my experience, was like anger and seeing how much wrong that there was going on, and somebody to back me up and be like, no, what you have is totally valid. Let's figure out how we can make this right for you.
That's 100%. The thing is, it's like, I don't want your sympathy. I want you to help me get out of this.
Yeah, exactly.
Because-
I'm already going through enough pain. Please help me get out of it.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know, something that people say to me, it's like, I'm there, but it's like, are your actions backing that up
Mm-hmm.
to your words? Because that's just meaningless.
Right. And you could say you're there, but are you really emotionally available for me to come to you with all of these things that I have going on too? Because if you're not, that's totally fine, and we totally respect that, but that's something that I need to know, so that I know I can't come to you with this information. I can still come to you if I need a distraction, but I can't come to you to put something on you.
Yeah. Just even like voicing your boundaries with this,
Mm-hmm.
super important, because it's like, if I divulge all of this to you, because I trust you and I expect, or I hope that you will be there to help me do something about it, rather than
Exactly.
just being like a wall to hear my thoughts, you know?
Right. I can already do that. Looking in the mirror, I can talk to myself, and I have that wall already. And sometimes you're looking for advice, and that's great, and you should probably, at least from my experience of like, hey, I do need advice right now, and I would disclose that information to them. But sometimes you need that hand to hold, you need the shoulder to cry on, and sometimes you need people to advocate for you too. And yeah, I already felt like I had enough people feeling bad for me. I didn't want any more from the people closest to me. That was I think probably the hardest thing to know was, and recognize and come to that realization that I don't want this sadness anymore. I just want people to help me fight.
Yeah.
But here's the hard thing too, is what do you do? Nobody knows what to do and how to handle these situations because we aren't prepared to handle them. You aren't prepared to face all of these rules and regulations that schools have and that the laws have. Title IX screws you over and continues to do so. And there's so many twists and turns, and nobody knows how to get through those unless you're trained to do that. But at the same time, if you're in that position like I was, I mean, you just have to suck it up and just kind of do it. And it sucked. It was horrible. It was so hard. I spent so much time sitting in front of that computer researching late at night all of the rules and regulations of Title IX.
And even the people who are trained to handle this, they're just not known, or it's just not even transparent of who that person is, or even like how they best could help in this situation. And when you're in it, you're in it.
You're in it for real.
Yeah, and it's like, I can't think rationally because you're just so tied up in your emotions that you're like, I just need to get through the next day or through this day pretty much.
You're in survival mode of mentally, physically, emotionally. It's, at least when I was doing this, I removed myself from the situation and just watched myself work pretty much. And it wasn't even something I was emotionally invested in until after the whole thing. And then everything hit me like a truck. And that's why I fell into that super, super dark hole when school started. And I took the year off actually, because I knew it would just be too much. All of it online, and if I couldn't get out of the house, I was gonna just spiral even more than I already had.
No, it's hard because you have to suppress your feelings just to get through all the work that you need to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then as soon as that's over with, it's almost like you are dissociated. You don't, and that's not, but like that's almost like how we're taught in a way to deal with problems.
Yeah.
It's like you just are expected to like brush it off and just move on to the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't really deal with that trauma and how that is affecting your day-to-day things.
Yeah, and you see it, I mean, still so commonly today because there's not an option for people to do anything but report or just ignore it. And if you just ignore it, I mean, yeah, there's a societal expectation that you brush it off and pretend like everything is fine, even though it could be burning at the back of your mind for years, knowing what had happened to you, because that's what happened. And what do you do with that? Because I guess it's inappropriate to start crying in the middle of the day because you're thinking about what happened, but that needs to be normalized, because you can't just expect people to push these feelings and thoughts and emotions aside. Like, that's part of healing, is you have to experience that. You have to process what has happened, and it's not fun at all. None of the healing process, at least in my experience, was fun or enjoyable. It was a lot of pain and a lot of having to think and realize what had happened. It was long, it was painful, it still is painful, and it's something that I'm going to carry with me for the rest of my life. Hopefully can do something positive with it and raise awareness about what the reporting process at least was like for me. I know it's not the same for everybody. Some people are fortunate enough to win and have it go very smoothly, but sometimes it's like me, where you're fighting tooth and nail and you experience no communication for a month. There was one time from between May and June, I counted out the 30 days that I heard nothing. And I finally, on that 30th day, I sent an email. I said, where is everybody? What's happening? What's going on with the case? Why has nobody talked to me? I'm literally the main person in this. What are you keeping me out of?
And you shouldn't be forced to advocate for yourself. There should be advocates readily available to take that, because you should be able to feel how you're feeling and not have to suppress it in a manner that's taxing and harmful to you, because then it just all comes full throttle and it's like you're not equipped to handle it all at once. And then you're just like, I can't do this.
No. And part of it too that I also think about a lot is the people who are making the decisions on these cases and the investigations, is how trained that they are. Because another thing that I forgot to tell you earlier was I had made a request prior to the decision being made for multiple people to review my case and review all of the evidence that I had and all of the evidence that they had. And they denied that request and left it up to one person to make such a loaded decision. Why do we do that? Why is that allowed? We trust one person to make such a big decision on something that's going to impact two people for the rest of their lives. That should at least be a panel, in my opinion. There should be multiple perspectives going in on this. And that one hurt too, because it just was like denial after denial after denial from the college, from the company that they used, from the rules and regulations. Like, I just felt like doors were always shutting in my face.
Well, it's also like, do they have a background where they understand how trauma really affects an individual? Like, trauma-informed care is so important.
And I couldn't tell you.
And that's the thing, if they're not being transparent of that, you're pretty much trusting a stranger.